got a half hour for me to preach. What do you think about that? Is that good news or what? Oh yeah, that's good news, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, right about now you're probably thinking about all the goodies back there. And that's okay, because I already had some. When I was a kid, I always thought that fences around a yard were there for just a couple of reasons. One was to keep your dog from going out into somebody else's yard and leaving some sort of calling card. The other reason I thought fences were around the yard was for little guys like me to climb. And back in those old days, at the top of the fence, you had like 2x4s or 2x6s that ran across the top of the fences. And you could walk and balance yourself and have a good old time. Pretend you're tightrope walking, whatever the case might be. But that's what I thought fences were for. Until something happened one day when some friends and I were out in a big back lot behind a row of houses playing baseball. And the ball was pitched, and the kid hit it, and I was at the outfield. I was probably 9 years old, 8 or 9, and I was running as fast as I could. I was going to catch that ball, and I jumped up with my glove, and it went over my head and over the fence into Mrs. Brown's backyard. Mrs. Brown. The Mrs. Brown. The old, nasty Mrs. Brown. The one who would always tell you to, "Don't you step on my property," when you walk past her house. The one who, if you're riding your bicycle, would sit on the front porch and yell, "You ride those bicycles in the street where they belong." The woman that you knew, if your baseball went into her yard, she'd already made it clear it's hers. And there went our only baseball. Plop, right into her yard. You know what happened? Everybody looked at me and said, "Jerry, you missed it. You better go get it." I said, "Well, whoa, wait a minute. Let's have the guy that hit the ball go get it. I mean, we gave him a home run for this. Let's have him go get it." And he said, "No, I don't want to go get it either. Let's have the oldest kid should go get it." And that one said, "Oh, no. It should be the fastest runner that should get it." We were petrified to go get that baseball. That fence was more than a fence. That was the barrier between life and death. And we were petrified. That fence was symbolic of all things evil to kids our age. Symbolic of the kind of person that you only heard about, infrequently encountered. We were scared to death. Well, when I got a little older, I discovered fences are there for other reasons too. When I lived in the Upper Peninsula, that's the rest of the story. You'll never know. You'll never know. When you leave this place, you'll never know if I got my baseball back. It really wasn't my baseball. It was somebody else's. And you'll never know because I can't remember. But when I moved to the Upper Peninsula with my family and spent a few years up there, there was a big row going on in one portion of Gladstone. It was called the Bluff. Now, whenever you hear those kinds of names for a community, a subdivision, the Bluff, you know that they probably got a couple more dollars in their pocket than you do. But the big row going on up there was somebody put a fence up around their yard. And the association said no fences. And there were people divided on the issue, people carrying signs, making phone calls. The association was going to sue them over the fence because it looks tacky, it looks bad, and it destroys our property value. We don't want those kind of people, some of them were saying, in our neighborhood. Those kind of people? But people that like fences are those kind of people? Interesting, isn't it? Isn't it interesting how fences are there not only to protect what you have, but they can also be used to keep things out, keep people out. And not just physical fences, but the fences that we build in our minds and in our hearts. And it seems like our society today, lately in the past few years, I've never seen so many nasty fences being built up between people. Just haven't. In large areas and in small. In the confirmation class this morning, we talked about Moses and the Exodus experience. And we talked about why the Hebrew people were in Egypt to begin with. They were there because there was a huge famine in the land. There was a huge drought. They couldn't feed their sheep. They couldn't feed their people. There was no clean water because in times of drought, the water gets used up or becomes very muddy and polluted, what little there is. There was no way to earn a living, no way to feed their family. They were looking at destitution right in the eyeball. So what do? We talked about how they crossed the border into a land that was really doing very, very well. Egypt, the Nile River, the lush land all around it that could support thousands and thousands of more people that already lived there. And at first the Egyptians, we learned from the Bible, were really glad to have these immigrants come in because they were cheap labor. But then after a while they discovered that there's too many of them. There's too many of them. And they're going to start taking our good jobs. And they don't speak the same language we do, and when they do, they speak it kind of funny. And those Hebrew women, woo-wee. Talk about women that can produce kids, bam, 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 they're all over the place. They're really fertile. Pretty soon there's going to be more of them than there is of us. That's going to really damage our way of life. We've got to do something about this. So what did they do? They put the Hebrew people under economic slavery. So they did. They had them, they used them, paid them next to nothing, just enough money to get by every day, just enough money to buy enough food to feed their family for one day at a time, and they kept them in economic distress, had them building buildings and houses, making the bricks and everything, and if they complained, they would cut their rations. They were oppressed. They were treated horribly in a land of plenty. And then we talked about how God looked down and had pity. Had pity upon the Egyptians? Nope. Had pity upon the people who were being abused in the land of plenty. And that's how Moses was called to lead them out. And the book of Exodus tells us that when the Hebrews finally got their own land, a land where they could raise their crops, raise their sheep, a land where they could build their homes, a land that had the Jordan River running through it, and all that nice little plains that would grow everything that they need. And once they started building their cities, the book of Exodus gave them an instruction. It said, don't mistreat the immigrant in your country. Remember that you were once an immigrant in a strange land. Remember the abuse that you endured, and don't do it to anyone else. We throw up fences, though, don't we? We don't like a particular race, a particular creed. We throw up fences that separate us. Separate God's people based on something we say is legal or illegal, right or wrong. We throw up the fences. The problem with that is when we throw up a fence, we separate ourselves from God's people, and how can we be the church? Well, just food for thought there. But you know, we also throw up other fences, don't we? We throw up a fence where we just plain don't like somebody. Who can I pick on today? Who don't I like today? Bill, I don't like you today, okay? Can Can you handle that? You're okay with that? All right, now pick on somebody else. For whatever reason, we decide we don't like somebody, or we don't like a family, or we don't like the way somebody's raising their kids, or we just don't like somebody for whatever reason. And so what do? We go on a little mission to let them know that we don't like them. And that mission usually includes letting other people know why we don't like them, so that they can toss up their fence and maybe make our fence a little sturdier. How can we call ourselves the people of God if we behave like that? If we throw up fences like that? We don't realize that every time we throw up a fence between God's people, we're not simply separating ourselves from people we don't like. We're separating ourselves from God. But we don't want to look at it that way, do we? I did a funeral service yesterday. I do funeral services for people that don't have a church home or whatever the case might be. I just try never to turn them down. Some people say, well, that's good, Jerry, because a lot of people have come to the church here as a result of your funerals that you've done for them. Well, yeah, but that's not why I do them. I do them because there's a need there. At any rate, I had a conversation with the deceased son. The woman was 70 years old, died suddenly at home. And I met with the son on Thursday. And I said, tell me about your mother. Usually when I ask that question, tell me about your loved one, you get the story about how they did this with their life, they did that, and all the things they've accomplished. And he said, I want you to talk about my mother, so I'm going to tell you about her. Said she was 11 years old when she was in the family car. She and her mother, her father, her two sisters, and her brother. Her dad was in a hurry to get wherever it was they were going, and he tried to pass a lot of cars. This was 1952. He tried to pass a lot of cars on a hill, and he was hit head-on by a garbage truck. Her two sisters, her brother, and her mother were killed instantly. She and her father were in the hospital for months. And then he said that after they got out of the hospital, his mother spent a lot of years of abuse at the hands of her father, because every time he'd look at her, it would remind him that someone survived that could make him feel guilty. She ran away when she was 13. She couldn't take it anymore. She was on the verge of prostitution just to get money when a nun in Detroit saw her walking down the street and called her over. She told her story, and the nun gave her a place to stay. She stayed there till she was about 17. Then she left. That was the age you had to go out on your own again. He said his mother went out on his own and met a man and got married and had him, the young man I was talking with. And that he said that then that man deserted her. He said, I never knew my father. He deserted her when I was about 6 months old. He said when he was 3 years old, he can remember being pulled down the street in a radio flyer red wagon. Remember those? But he's being pulled down the street in that wagon because she had nowhere to go, nowhere to live. They were homeless. She was on her way to give her child up to the county orphanage that they had back then in the 50s, because she couldn't support it. She stopped at a corner to cross the street, and an elderly woman saw that there were possessions in the wagon, that both of them looked dirty and hungry, and she asked what was going on, and she explained it. This elderly woman said, I own this apartment house right over here. I've got 2 empty apartments left. I'm willing to give you one of them. She said, I don't have any money. She said, I'm not worried about that. going to get you in off the street. When you find work and you have someone that can supply money here, you can pay me what you can afford. The young man was crying when he was telling me this story. To this day, he still calls that older woman his grandmother, even though she's long gone, of course. And he says, you know, if it hadn't been for that act of kindness, I don't know where I'd be today. Don't know what I'd be. Don't know how my life would have turned out. That one act of kindness. How easy it would have been to toss up the fence, shake your head and just say, one more loser on the street. What she even have kids for? There ought to be a law. Ought to have the child taken away. Oh, another person on welfare. Everybody knows they don't want to work. They're just bums. Cut them off. Throw up that fence. Harden that heart. Wow. I read a cute little story just yesterday. I don't know. Sometimes when you're on the internet, you got nowhere to go, and you just become curious about your own curiosity. And I just discovered this wonderful little story. It's about a mouse. This little mouse that was in a farmhouse kitchen looking out through a crack in the wall. And the little mouse saw the farmer and his wife come in from the store, and they started pulling things out of the bag. A pound of cheese, a loaf of bread, milk, fruit. And the mouse is thinking, oh, this is good. And then the mouse went, ugh. When the mouse saw the farmer's wife pull a mouse trap out of the bag. And the mouse panicked and thought, what am I going to do? Man, they're out to kill me. This is horrible. So the mouse left the house real quick and ran out to the barn. Went over to the chicken and said, they got a mouse trap in there. They're trying to kill me. We got to do something. And the chicken said, I got my own problems, okay? I got my own issues here to deal with. All right? So just, wish I could help, but I've got my own issues. So then the mouse, becoming frantic, runs over to the pig. Said, there's a mouse trap in the house. They're after me. And the pig says, that's really too bad, and I'll pray for you. That had to make the mouse feel really good. I'll pray for you. So the mouse decides, this is going from bad to worse, and ran over to the cow and said, hey, they got a mouse trap in there, and that's just not right. They're trying to take my life. I don't eat that much. And the cow said, well, it's the way life works, isn't it? Mouse returned back home. Later that night, the farmer and his wife heard the mouse trap go off. And she jumped out of bed. And she ran over to the hutch where she had tucked that mouse trap in. And she reached her hand under there, not knowing that it didn't catch a mouse, it caught the tail of a poisonous snake. And the snake bit her. And the farmer rushed her to the hospital to have that dealt with. And the hospital said, we've done all we can. She may recover okay. Take her on home and take good care of her. So the farmer took her home. And knowing that all things can be cured with chicken soup, visited the chicken. Well, the woman got really worse, really bad. All the relatives and all the friends knew that she was approaching death's door, so we better go over and pay one last visit. The farmer, with all those people coming in, decided, well, I can't just turn them out without anything to eat, so he made a visit to the pig. He fed all the people. And unfortunately, his wife died from the snake bite. Huge funeral, lots of people turning out. They must have all been Methodist because they expected to eat. So he had to pay a visit to the cow. During all of this, the mouse is peeking through that crack in the wall, thinking how sad, heart aching. It's not my problem. I'll pray for you. Wish there was something I could do. A fence, a fence, a fence. Let's pray. Who are we, God, if we can't love one another? Who are we, O God, if we can't have a higher calling than any call that is placed upon us by the human mind? Who are we if we aren't people of mercy and justice? Who are we if we can't see the care that others need? We're yours, O God. And if we belong to you, help us to see everyone belongs to you. For all things sacred, we give you thanks. Through Christ our Lord. Amen.